Olivia Harper stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom, now transformed into something magical. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the gauze curtains she'd hung just that morning, casting a golden glow over the pale yellow walls she'd spent 3 weekends painting. Every corner of the nursery whispered of love and careful planning. From the vintage wooden crib she'd restored herself to the hand-embroidered quilts folded neatly in the antique dresser. She traced her fingers along the smooth wood of the rocking chair, a piece she'd found at a flea market and refinished in soft gray. This chair would be where she'd nurse her baby, where she'd sing lullabies during those quiet 3 a.m. moments that every mother promised were sacred. The mobile above the crib caught the light. Delicate paper cranes in shades of cream and gold that she'd folded during her evening design sessions, each one a meditation on the life growing inside her. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 32, Olivia had built her freelance graphic design business from nothing, working late nights and early mornings to establish herself in Chicago's competitive market. But this nursery represented something different from professional success. It was her declaration that she could create beauty and safety for her child, that despite never having a picture-perfect family herself, she knew how to nurture. "It's perfect," Ryan said from behind her, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. Her husband of 3 years had watched her transform this room with quiet admiration, never questioning her need to do most of the work herself. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, how much the space meant to her sense of identity as a soon-to-be mother. Olivia leaned back against his chest, feeling their baby respond with a gentle kick. "Do you think she knows we're talking about her room?" Ryan corrected with a smile in his voice. "And yes, I think he approves of his mom's impeccable taste." They decided to keep the baby's gender a surprise, but their playful debate had become a cherished ritual. Olivia was convinced she was carrying a girl, maybe because she hoped to give her daughter the childhood stability she'd never quite had herself. The doorbell interrupted their quiet moment. "That's Jasmine," Olivia said, recognizing the dramatic double ring that was her best friend's signature. "Come see what I've created," Olivia called, leading Jasmine down the hallway moments later. Jasmine Lee stopped short in the nursery doorway, her usually sharp tongue rendered speechless for a full 10 seconds. "Liv, this is—" She shook her head, stepping carefully into the room as if entering a church. "This is absolutely stunning. You've outdone yourself." "Do you think it's too much?" Olivia asked, suddenly second-guessing the vintage photograph gallery she'd created above the changing table. Black and white images of Chicago landmarks where she wanted to take her child someday. "Too much?" Jasmine laughed, setting down the bouquet of white peonies she'd brought. "Honey, this room should be featured in magazines. Look at these details, the custom bookshelf, the way you've arranged everything. Your baby is going to be the luckiest kid in Chicago." Olivia felt a swell of pride. She'd poured 6 months of weekends into the space, researching every purchase, comparing safety ratings, choosing each element to create something that felt both stylish and nurturing. The room cost more than her first car, but she'd saved carefully, turning down dinners out and weekend trips to build what felt like a nest of her own design. "I keep thinking about how different it will be," Olivia admitted, arranging the peonies in a crystal vase on the dresser. "Growing up, Ethan and I shared a bedroom until I was 12. Mom was always so worried about money, about appearances. I want my child to have beauty from day one." Jasmine's expression softened. As Olivia's college roommate turned lifelong friend, she'd witnessed the complex dynamics of the Harper family. "Your baby is going to have something better than a beautiful room, Liv. She's going to have a mother who thinks she deserves beautiful things." Ryan appeared in the doorway with glasses of lemonade. "Are you two ready for tomorrow's shower? My mom called this morning asking if she could bring extra chairs." "Your mom's the sweetest," Olivia said, accepting her glass. "I still can't believe how much help she's been with planning. She's more excited than I am." "That's because she's not carrying around an extra 25 pounds and wondering if her feet will ever return to normal size," Jasmine pointed out,
earning a laugh from both Olivia and Ryan. The three of them spent the next hour in the nursery, Olivia showing off features she'd designed, the built-in nightlight that cast star patterns on the ceiling, the organization system she'd created for tiny clothes, the corner where she planned to keep a basket of books for bedtime stories. Every detail reflected months of dreaming and planning. As evening approached and Jasmine prepared to leave, she pulled Olivia aside in the hallway. "I hope you know how incredible this is, what you've created. Not just the room, though it's gorgeous, but this whole new chapter. You've built a business, found an amazing husband, and now you're about to become a mom, all on your own terms." "Thanks, Jazz. That means everything coming from you."
Promise me you won't let anyone diminish this, okay? I know your family can be complicated, but this is your time, your baby, your rules. Olivia hugged her friend tightly, not entirely sure why the words felt like a warning. "I promise." That night, she sat in the rocking chair as Ryan showered, her hands on her belly, whispering to their unborn child about the room that waited for them. The nursery felt like more than furniture and decorations. It was her love made visible, her commitment to breaking cycles and creating something new. Tomorrow's shower would celebrate not just the baby, but the safe harbor she'd built for both of them. She had no way of knowing that in less than 24 hours, this sanctuary would become the center of a family storm that would change everything. The Riverside Community Center had been transformed into a pastel wonderland by Margaret Harper's meticulous planning. Yellow and white streamers cascaded from the ceiling, matching balloon arrangements anchored every table, and an impressive spread of finger foods covered the buffet table. Margaret moved through the space like a general reviewing troops, adjusting flower arrangements and repositioning gift bags with military precision. "Olivia, darling, you look radiant!" Aunt Dorothy gushed, embracing her with the enthusiasm reserved for family gatherings. The room buzzed with conversation as cousins, coworkers, and family friends gathered around tables decorated with tiny booties and pacifier centerpieces. Olivia smoothed her emerald maternity dress, chosen because Ryan said it brought out her eyes, and smiled at the familiar faces surrounding her. Her colleagues from the design firm had claimed a corner table comparing notes on recent projects while eyeing the dessert table. Ryan's mother, Carol, was helping Margaret coordinate the gift opening, the two women having bonded over their shared excitement about becoming grandmothers. "The decorations are beautiful, Mom," Olivia said, finding Margaret arranging favor bags near the entrance. "You've outdone yourself." Margaret beamed with the satisfaction of a successful hostess. "Well, it's important that everything be perfect for such a special occasion. A first grandchild only comes along once." She adjusted a slightly crooked banner reading, "Welcome, Baby Harper," and stepped back to assess her work. "I do hope Ethan arrives on time. You know how he can be." Olivia felt a familiar twist in her stomach at the mention of her younger brother. At 29, Ethan still operated on what the family generously called Ethan time, showing up late to everything from Christmas dinner to job interviews. But Margaret had insisted he be invited to the shower, despite the event being traditionally women only. "Speaking of Ethan," Jasmine appeared at Olivia's side, lowering her voice, "didn't you say he had some big news to share?" Before Olivia could respond, Margaret clapped her hands for attention. "Ladies, if I could have everyone gather around for a toast before we begin the festivities." The room quieted as guests formed a circle around Olivia, who suddenly felt self-conscious with all eyes on her. Margaret raised a glass of sparkling cider, her face glowing with maternal pride. "Today we celebrate not just the upcoming arrival of my first grandchild, but the strength and love of family. Olivia has always been our reliable daughter, our steady one, and I know she'll be a wonderful mother.
Margaret's voice carried across the room with practiced authority. Family means everything to the Harpers. We support each other, we sacrifice for each other, and we always put the needs of family first. Something in her mother's tone made Olivia's smile falter slightly. There was an emphasis on certain words, reliable, sacrifice, that felt loaded with meaning she couldn't quite grasp. "To Olivia and baby Harper," Margaret concluded, raising her glass higher. "To Olivia," the room echoed, and Olivia felt genuinely moved by the warmth surrounding her. The gift opening began with fanfare, each present eliciting appreciative gasps from the assembled women. Olivia received everything from practical items like diapers and bottles to luxurious keepsakes. A silver picture frame from her college friends, organic cotton onises from her yoga class, and a beautiful baby book from Ryan's sister. "Oh, this is gorgeous," Olivia exclaimed, unwrapping a hand-knitted blanket from her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Callahan. The intricate pattern must have taken months to complete. "I made that during my evening television time," Mrs. Callahan explained with satisfaction. "Every baby deserves something made with love, something that's just theirs." Margaret was documenting everything with her camera, creating what she called memories for the baby book. But Olivia noticed her mother seemed distracted, glancing frequently at her phone and toward the entrance. They were halfway through the gift pile when the center's front door opened with a bang. Ethan Harper strode in with his characteristic confidence, his arm around a young woman with long dark hair and a nervous expression. "Sorry we're late," Ethan called across the room, seemingly oblivious to the fact that he was interrupting the gift opening. The room fell into polite murmurs as Margaret rushed to greet her son. Olivia watched her mother's face transform from mild annoyance to pure joy as she embraced Ethan and turned to his companion.
"Everyone, I'd like you to meet Lena," Margaret announced, her voice carrying a new energy that commanded attention. "Ethan's girlfriend." Lena Martinez looked to be in her mid-20s, with careful makeup and an outfit that suggested she'd dressed to impress. She waved shyly at the room full of strangers, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden attention. "Lena and Ethan have some wonderful news to share," Margaret continued, and Olivia felt her stomach drop. She knew that tone, the same one her mother had used when announcing Ethan's acceptance to college, his first job, every achievement that had ever mattered in their family. Ethan grinned and pulled Lena closer. "We're pregnant!" he announced, as if he were the first person in history to accomplish this feat. "Found out last week, can you believe it? 2 Harper babies arriving within months of each other." The room erupted in surprised congratulations, guests turning between Olivia and the new couple with confusion and delight. Olivia forced a smile, but she felt suddenly invisible, as if the spotlight had shifted away from her so quickly she was still blinking in the aftermath. "How wonderful!" Aunt Dorothy exclaimed. "2 new babies for Margaret to spoil!" "When are you due, dear?" asked one of Ryan's cousins, directing the question to Lena. "December," Lena replied softly. "About 3 months after Olivia." Margaret clasped her hands together with theatrical joy. "Christmas babies! Can you imagine anything more perfect?" Olivia sat frozen in her chair, surrounded by open gifts that suddenly felt insignificant. The careful timing of her shower, the months of planning, the beautiful decorations, all of it now shared space with Ethan's announcement. She caught Jasmine's eye across the room and saw her friend's jaw set in a hard line. The conversation swirled around the room as guests processed this unexpected news. Some looked between the 2 expectant mothers with obvious confusion about protocol. Whose shower was this, exactly? Others seemed delighted by the coincidence, already planning how the cousins would grow up together. But Olivia heard her mother's voice above all the others, effusive in her praise of Ethan's news, already making plans and offering help.
Margaret had moved to stand beside her son, her hand on his shoulder in a gesture of pride that Olivia recognized, but had rarely received herself. As the commotion continued around her, Olivia felt a familiar ache settling in her chest, the same feeling she'd had at every birthday party where Ethan's needs somehow took precedence, every family dinner where his problems became the evening's main topic. She'd learned long ago to make herself smaller in these moments, to smile and nod and play the supportive older sister. But this was supposed to be different. This was her baby shower. Her moment of celebration. The room she'd spent months creating, the life she'd planned so carefully, none of it felt like hers anymore. Margaret Harper's voice cut through the noise with sudden authority. Actually, since we're all here together, I have a special announcement to make. The room quieted again, and Olivia felt a chill of premonition. Her mother's tone had shifted to something formal, almost ceremonial. This was the voice Margaret used when she was about to make a decision that would affect everyone, whether they liked it or not. Please, everyone, gather round, Margaret continued, positioning herself at the center of the room with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. Margaret Harper commanded the room with the presence of a woman who had never doubted her right to make decisions for others. She stood between her two children, one hand resting possessively on Ethan's arm, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of someone about to solve a complicated problem. I've been thinking about this situation all week, she began, her voice carrying the authority that had governed family decisions for decades. Olivia has done such a beautiful job preparing for her baby, she continued, gesturing toward her daughter with what looked like pride, but felt like performance. That lovely nursery, all those carefully chosen pieces, such attention to detail, such generous spending. The compliment felt wrong, loaded with implications that made Olivia's skin prickle with unease. Around the room, guests nodded approvingly, unaware they were witnessing something other than maternal pride. But here's the thing. Margaret's voice took on the tone of reasoned explanation, as if she were solving a mathematical equation rather than discussing her children's lives. Ethan and Lena are just starting out. They don't have the resources that Olivia and Ryan have been blessed with. They don't have a beautiful apartment or an established business or the luxury of time to plan. Olivia opened her mouth, but Margaret held up a silencing hand, the gesture so automatic that Olivia found herself obeying before she realized what was happening.
So, I've made a decision that I know shows the true spirit of this family, Margaret announced, her smile widening as if she were about to reveal a wonderful surprise. Olivia's nursery. All those beautiful things she's collected will go to Ethan and Leanna. They need it more. And Olivia, being the generous sister she's always been, will understand that family comes first. The room fell into stunned silence. 30 women, gathered to celebrate Olivia's approaching motherhood, suddenly found themselves witnessing something that felt more like a public sentencing than a family announcement. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. The words hit her like physical blows. Olivia's nursery will go to Ethan and Leanna. The room she'd spent months creating, the space that represented her love and hope and careful planning, stripped away with a casual announcement at her own baby shower. Margaret, Ryan's mother, Carol, spoke carefully. "Surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said," Margaret replied, with the confidence of someone who had never been successfully challenged. "The nursery furniture, the decorations, all of it. Ethan and Leanna will move it to their apartment this weekend. It's the practical thing to do, and it's what family does for each other." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his earlier bravado fading as he registered the horrified expressions around the room. "Mom, maybe we should talk about this privately?" "There's nothing private about family love," Margaret declared. "Olivia understands. Don't you, sweetheart? You've always been so good at putting family first." All eyes turned to Olivia, who sat paralyzed in her chair, surrounded by the gifts from her baby shower, while her mother calmly dismantled her future.
The vintage rocking chair where she'd planned to nurse her baby, the crib she'd refinished with her own hands, the mobile of paper cranes she'd folded during quiet evenings, all of it reassigned to Ethan, with the casual authority of someone redistributing office supplies. I... Olivia's voice came out as barely a whisper. The room waited, 30 faces watching her response to having her motherhood publicly diminished to spare parts for her brother's life. Jasmine stood abruptly from her chair, her face flushed with outrage. "Margaret, you can't be serious! That nursery represents months of Olivia's work, her money, her—" "Jasmine, dear." Margaret's voice carried a sharp warning. "This is a family matter. Olivia can always buy new things. He has the resources. But Ethan and Leanna are facing an unexpected pregnancy with nothing prepared. Where's the compassion in letting them struggle when Olivia can easily help?" The manipulation was masterful and familiar. Margaret had reframed Olivia's months of loving preparation as hoarding, her financial stability as a reason to sacrifice, her careful planning as selfishness in the face of Ethan's need. Lena spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "I don't want to take anyone's baby things. We can figure something out on our own." But Margaret silenced her with a look. "Nonsense. This is how the Harper family works. We share, we sacrifice, we take care of each other. Olivia knows this." Around the room, guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. Some looked at Olivia with pity, others with confusion about whether they were witnessing generosity or cruelty. Aunt Dorothy cleared her throat nervously. Cousin Sarah studied her hands. The women from Olivia's yoga class whispered amongst themselves, their faces reflecting the shock that Olivia felt but couldn't express. "I spent 6 months on that room," Olivia finally managed, her voice stronger now, but still shaking. "Every piece chosen specifically, refinished, arranged. It's not just furniture, Mom. It's things," Margaret interrupted firmly. "Just things. And things can be replaced. But family relationships, family loyalty, those are precious. Surely you don't value objects more than your brother's happiness." The trap was perfect and familiar. Olivia could either accept the public humiliation gracefully, proving herself the generous sister her mother had always demanded, or resist and be painted as selfish, materialistic, uncaring about family. Margaret had orchestrated this moment with the skill of decades of practice, turning what should have been Olivia's celebration into a test of her worthiness as a daughter and sister. Jasmine gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles white. "This is supposed to be Olivia's baby shower, her day. How can you—" "Jasmine," Olivia said quietly, her voice finally finding some strength, "it's okay." But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. As the room watched, as her mother smiled with satisfied benevolence, as Ethan avoided her eyes and Leanna looked miserable, Olivia felt something breaking inside her chest. Not her heart. She'd survived her mother's favoritism too many times for that. But something deeper. Her willingness to smile and accept. To be the reliable daughter who absorbed the family's dysfunction without complaint. "Of course you understand," Margaret said, reaching over to squeeze Olivia's shoulder with possessive affection. "You've always been such a good sister, such a generous heart."
The touch felt like ownership, like being branded with the role she'd never chosen, but had accepted for 32 years. Around the room, some guests began to resume conversations, clearly uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed, but unsure how to respond. Others continued staring, waiting to see if Olivia would find her voice or continue playing the part her mother had written for her. Olivia looked down at her hands, folded over her pregnant belly, and felt her baby kick as if responding to the tension. In that moment, she realized with crystalline clarity that this moment would define everything that came next.
Would she pass this pattern on to her child? Would she raise another generation to believe that love meant erasure, that family meant sacrifice without reciprocation? For the first time in her life, surrounded by baby shower gifts and the wreckage of her mother's announcement, Olivia Harper began to understand that some things were worth fighting for, even if it meant fighting the people who claimed to love her most. The drive home from the community center passed in suffocating silence. Ryan kept glancing at Olivia in the passenger seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her face turned toward the window as Chicago's familiar neighborhoods blurred past. She hadn't spoken since they'd left the shower, hadn't responded to the awkward goodbyes from guests who seemed unsure whether to offer congratulations or condolences. The gift bags from the shower sat in the back seat, thoughtful presents from friends and family that now felt hollow, overshadowed by the knowledge that her mother had publicly stripped away the foundation of her preparation for motherhood. Every onesie, every bottle, every carefully chosen item seemed meaningless when the room they were meant to fill would soon be empty. When they reached their apartment building, Ryan finally broke the silence. "Liv, what happened back there?" "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not yet." He nodded, understanding. They rode the elevator to their floor in the same heavy quiet, the familiar ding of their arrival sounding unusually loud in the small space. The apartment felt different when they walked through the door. The same furniture, the same artwork on the walls, the same afternoon light streaming through their living room windows, but everything felt contaminated by what had happened. Olivia moved through the space like a ghost, mechanically setting down her purse and the gift bags, her movements careful and distant. Without thinking, her feet carried her down the hallway to the nursery. She stopped in the doorway, one hand pressed against the frame, staring at the room that had been her sanctuary just hours earlier. The late afternoon sun still streamed through the gauze curtains, still cast the same golden glow over the pale yellow walls. But now every carefully chosen piece felt borrowed, temporary, already half gone. The vintage rocking chair where she'd imagined countless quiet moments with her baby, no longer hers. The crib she had spent weekends refinishing, sanding each spindle by hand until it was perfect, reassigned to Ethan's needs. The mobile of paper cranes that had taken her months of evening work to complete, reduced to mere decoration that could be easily transferred to serve someone else's child. "You don't have to do this," Ryan said quietly from behind her. Olivia didn't turn around. She couldn't stop staring at the room, cataloging each piece that would soon be gone, each element of her vision that her mother had casually redistributed. She announced it in front of 30 people, Ryan, in front of everyone who matters to our families. How do I take that back? By saying no. His voice was gentle but firm. By telling your mother that this is our child, our home, our decision. You don't understand. Olivia finally turned to face him, and Ryan was shocked by the emptiness in her eyes. This isn't new. This is who she is, who have always been in this family. The reliable one who sacrifices so Ethan can have what he needs. Ryan moved closer, his hands settling on her shoulders. But this is different. This is our baby. Is it, though? The question came out broken, barely a whisper. Or is it just another opportunity for me to prove I'm a good daughter, a good sister, another chance to step aside so the golden child can shine? They stood there, in the nursery doorway, surrounded by the evidence of Olivia's months of loving preparation, while the weight of Margaret's announcement settled around them like dust. The room that had felt like promise now felt like a monument to her lifelong invisibility. The phone rang, shattering the heavy silence. Ryan moved to answer it, but Olivia caught his arm. "If it's my mother? Olivia Harper? What the hell was that?" Jasmine's voice exploded through the speaker when Ryan answered, her outrage cutting through the apartment like a cleansing wind. "Jazz." "No, you don't jazz me. I just spent 20 minutes in my car processing what I witnessed, and I'm ready to drive back to that community center and give your mother a piece of my mind."
"That she won't forget." Jasmine's voice was shaking with fury.
What she did to you was unconscionable in front of all those people at your own baby shower?
She's right, Olivia said, sinking into the rocking chair that might not be hers much longer. Ethan and Lena don't have money for all this. I do. It makes practical sense. Practical sense? Jasmine's voice pitched higher with disbelief.
Olivia Marie Harper, have you lost your mind? That woman just publicly humiliated you and stole your motherhood, and you're talking about practical sense?
It's just furniture, Jazz. Bullshit. The word cracked through the phone like a whip. It is not just furniture, and you know it. That room represents months of your work, your dreams, your preparation for this baby. It's your love made visible, and she took it from you like you were a child who couldn't be trusted to make decisions about your own life. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling tears threatening for the first time since the shower. What am I supposed to do? Fight her? Make a scene? Divide the family right before my baby is born? Yes, Jasmine said without hesitation. Yes to all of those things, if that's what it takes. Liv, I've watched you shrink yourself to fit your family's dysfunction for 15 years. I've seen you smile and nod and accept every slight, every dismissal, every time they treated you like you mattered less than Ethan. But this isn't just about you anymore. The words hit Olivia like cold water. She opened her eyes and looked around the nursery, really looked at it, seeing not just the furniture and decorations, but the intention behind every choice. The books she'd selected for bedtime stories, the soft lighting she'd planned for midnight feedings, the chair positioned perfectly for watching her child sleep. Your baby deserves a mother who fights for them, Jasmine continued, her voice gentling slightly. A mother who doesn't teach them that love means disappearing, that family means sacrificing your dignity for other people's comfort. Is that the lesson you want to pass on? Ryan was watching Olivia carefully, seeing something shift in her expression as Jasmine's words found their mark. The defeated slump of her shoulders began to straighten slightly, and a spark of something, anger maybe, or determination flickered in her eyes. I can't change overnight, Jazz. This pattern, it goes back decades. Then start small, Jasmine urged. Start with one word. No. Just try it out. See how it feels on your tongue. No, Mom, you can't have my nursery. No, Mom, you don't get to make decisions about my child. No, Mom, I won't sacrifice my motherhood for Ethan's convenience. After they hung up, Olivia sat in the rocking chair for a long time, her hands on her belly, feeling her baby's movements, as if they were trying to communicate something important. Ryan settled on the floor beside her chair, his presence steady and comforting. "What are you thinking?" he asked eventually. "I'm thinking about all the times I've let her do this. All the times I smiled and nodded and told myself it was easier than fighting. And I'm wondering what kind of mother that makes me. Someone who can't even protect her child's nursery from her own family's greed?" "It makes you human," Ryan said gently. "It makes you someone who's learning that some things are worth fighting for." As darkness fell outside their windows, Olivia continued rocking in the chair that might soon belong to someone else, feeling something new and unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Not quite courage yet, but perhaps the seed of it. The beginning of understanding that love shouldn't require erasure, that family shouldn't demand the sacrifice of selfhood. The nursery around her felt different now. Not lost, but claimed. Not temporary, but worth defending. For the first time in 32 years, Olivia Harper began to consider the radical possibility of saying no to her mother's expectations. Unable to sleep, Olivia found herself wandering the apartment at 2 a.m., her mind churning through memories she'd spent years trying to forget. The baby shower played on repeat in her thoughts, but now it was joined by a parade of other moments. Decades of similar scenes where she'd smiled and nodded and accepted every slight, every dismissal, every time they treated you like you mattered less than Ethan. She was 8 years old again, watching her mother redirect the guests at her birthday party to focus on Ethan's scraped knee from falling off his bike. Olivia doesn't mind sharing her special day, Margaret had announced to the confused parents and children. She's always been so mature, so understanding. The birthday cake was cut while Ethan sat on Margaret's lap receiving comfort for his minor injury, while Olivia stood in the corner of her own party learning that her needs came second to his dramatics. The memory shifted, and she was 16, accepted to the art program at Northwestern with a partial scholarship. She'd worked for 2 years on her portfolio, staying after school in the art room, babysitting neighborhood children to save money for supplies. But when Ethan failed his SATs for the second time, Margaret decided that Olivia's college money needed to go towards expensive tutoring for her brother. "You're so talented, sweetheart," Margaret had said, reviewing the bank statements at the kitchen table. "You'll find another way to pay for school. But Ethan needs help now, and family takes care of family."
Olivia had ended up at a community college for her first 2 years, working nights at a coffee shop to save money for transfer. By the time she finally made it to Northwestern, most of her high school friends had graduated and moved on. Ethan, meanwhile, had gotten into a decent state school with his improved test scores, where he'd spent 4 years partying and barely maintaining a C average, while Margaret praised his creative spirit and social intelligence. Standing in her living room at 2 a.m., Olivia could trace the pattern with devastating clarity. Every achievement she'd earned had been diminished or redirected to serve Ethan's needs. Every milestone in her life had been overshadowed by his latest crisis or celebration. When she'd started her graphic design business, the family dinner conversation had focused on Ethan's new girlfriend. When she'd gotten engaged to Ryan, Margaret had spent the entire announcement dinner talking about Ethan's job interview the next day. She remembered her college graduation, when she had graduated summa cum laude despite working full-time to pay her own way. Ethan had shown up hungover and late, but Margaret's attention had been entirely focused on making sure he was comfortable, getting him coffee, asking about his plans for the summer. Olivia's academic achievement had been acknowledged with a quick, "We're proud of you, dear," before the conversation moved on to Ethan's needs. The memories kept coming, each one adding weight to her understanding of how deeply rooted this dynamic had become. The time Ethan had crashed his car and Margaret had taken the down payment for Olivia's first apartment to cover his insurance deductible. The Christmas when Olivia had saved for months to buy Margaret a beautiful antique brooch, only to watch her mother fawn over Ethan's last-minute gas station flowers as if they were the most thoughtful gift she'd ever received. "Why didn't I see it before?" she whispered to the empty living room, her hands pressed against her belly where her baby slept peacefully, unaware of the family dysfunction they would soon inherit. But even as she asked the question, she knew the answer. She had seen it, had felt every slight, every dismissal, every moment when she'd been reduced to a supporting character in the story of Ethan's life. She'd just been trained so early and so thoroughly to accept it that fighting back had seemed impossible, even unthinkable. Margaret had crafted the perfect trap. Any resistance to the family's dynamics was labeled as selfishness. Any attempt to claim space for herself was portrayed as a betrayal of family loyalty. Olivia had learned to find identity in being the good daughter, the one who sacrificed without complaint, who absorbed the family's dysfunction like a shock absorber, protecting everyone else from the impact. She thought about Mrs. Callahan, their elderly neighbor, who had pulled Olivia aside after witnessing one particularly brutal family dinner 3 years ago. "Honey, don't let people decide what you deserve. They'll always take more than you give, and they'll convince you that taking less is a virtue." At the time, Olivia had dismissed the advice as well-meaning interference from someone who didn't understand family loyalty. Now she realized Mrs. Callahan had seen exactly what was happening, had recognized the slow erosion of Olivia's sense of self-worth that had been happening for decades. The baby shower wasn't an anomaly. It was the inevitable culmination of a lifetime of training. Margaret had simply done what she'd always done, redistributed Olivia's efforts to benefit Ethan while framing it as family love. The only difference
was that this time there were witnesses. This time, the humiliation had been public. But there was something else different this time. Something that made Olivia's chest tighten with a mixture of fear and possibility. This time, it wasn't just about her. The baby moving inside her deserved better than to inherit this legacy of invisible sacrifice. Her child deserved to see their mother as someone worthy of respect, someone whose needs mattered, someone who could model healthy boundaries instead of dysfunctional compliance. She found herself back in the nursery doorway looking at the room that represented so much more than baby furniture. It was evidence of her capacity to create beauty, to plan and prepare and love. It was proof that she could envision a different kind of childhood for her child than the one she'd experienced, if she was brave enough to fight for it. "I won't pass this on," she whispered to her unborn baby, the words feeling like a promise and a prayer. The decision crystallized in that moment, standing in the darkness of the nursery that was still hers, surrounded by months of careful preparation that no one had the right to take from her. She wouldn't transform into someone different overnight. 32 years of conditioning couldn't be undone with a single moment of clarity. But she could start with one small act of defiance. She could start by refusing to hand over the nursery. For the first time since the baby shower, Olivia Harper smiled. The next morning brought a text from Margaret that made Olivia's stomach clench. "Movers coming Saturday at 10 a.m. to transfer nursery to Ethan's place. So proud of your generous spirit. XOXO Mom." Olivia stared at the message for a full minute, feeling the familiar pull of compliance warring with the new resolve that had taken root during her dark hours of remembering. The old Olivia would have responded with acceptance, maybe even enthusiasm for helping her brother. But something had shifted irreversibly in those dark hours of remembering.
Instead of responding to the text, she made coffee and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, opening a new browser window. If Margaret thought she could simply redistribute Olivia's months of work with a casual announcement, she was about to discover how wrong she was. "What are you researching?" Ryan asked, appearing in the kitchen with hair still rumpled from sleep. "Nursery furniture," Olivia replied, her fingers clicking rapidly across the keyboard. "High-end baby stores that do quick delivery." Ryan poured himself coffee and settled across from her, studying her face carefully. "And why are we looking at nursery furniture when we already have a complete nursery?" "Because I'm not giving it to Ethan." The words came out steady and clear, surprising Olivia with their certainty. "I'm keeping every piece of what I've created, and I'm buying him and Lena a completely different set. Liv, I know it sounds crazy. I know it's expensive and probably excessive, but I can't let her take this from me, Ryan. The nursery isn't just furniture, it's proof that I can create something beautiful for our child, that I can plan and prepare and provide. If I let her strip it away, I'm teaching our baby that their mother's efforts don't matter, that love can be redistributed at someone else's whim." Ryan was quiet for a moment, watching her scroll through page after page of cribs and dressers. "This is about more than the nursery, isn't it?" "It's about everything," Olivia admitted, pausing in her search to look at him directly. "It's about 32 years of being told that my needs come second, that my achievements are less important, and that my role in this family is to sacrifice so everyone else can be comfortable. And it's about breaking that cycle before our baby learns to see their mother as someone whose worth is determined by how much she can give up." Her phone rang, and Jasmine's name appeared on the screen. "Please tell me you didn't respond to your mother with immediate compliance," Jasmine said without preamble. "I didn't respond at all, Olivia replied, putting the phone on speaker. "But I am sitting here looking at nursery furniture for Ethan and Lena." "Wait, what?" Olivia explained her plan. Keep her carefully curated nursery intact, but purchase a complete second set for her brother and his girlfriend. It would cost a fortune, probably close to $3,000 for everything they'd need, but it would allow her to maintain her boundaries while still appearing generous. "It's brilliant," Jasmine said after a moment. "Evil and expensive, but brilliant. You get to keep your sanity and your nursery while still looking like the generous sister. Your mother can't argue with that level of family support." "I feel like I'm being manipulative, like I'm playing games instead of just being direct." "Honey," Jasmine's voice gentled,
You've been conditioned for 32 years to believe that direct confrontation with your mother is impossible. This isn't manipulation. This is strategy. You're finding a way to protect yourself and your baby while working within the system she's created. It's actually kind of genius. Ryan nodded his agreement. And it sends a clear message that you're not the pushover she thinks you are, without giving her ammunition to paint you as selfish or difficult. Olivia spent the next hour researching furniture stores with quick delivery options. She found what she needed at a high-end baby boutique across town, a modern nursery set in white and gray that was stylish but completely different from her vintage aesthetic. The sales associate she spoke with was delighted to help arrange Saturday morning delivery to Ethan's apartment. "I'll need everything," Olivia said, reading from the list she'd compiled. "Crib, changing table, dresser, rocking chair, lamp, mobile, everything a new baby would need." The total came to $2,847, money she'd been saving for maternity leave. But as she provided her credit card information, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in years when it came to family decisions. Pride instead of resentment. Empowerment instead of resignation. The next step was the harder one. She needed to call Margaret and explain the change in plans without backing down or apologizing for her decision. "I can practice with you first," Jasmine offered. "Let me play your mother and try to guilt trip you into compliance. We'll work on your responses until they're automatic." They spent 20 minutes role-playing, with Jasmine delivering masterful impressions of Margaret's manipulation tactics, while Olivia practiced staying calm and firm. By the time they finished, Olivia felt armed with responses for every argument her mother might make. "Remember," Jasmine said before hanging up, "you're not asking for permission. You're informing her of your decision. Don't use apologetic language. Don't explain more than necessary, and don't let her make this about your character instead of your choice." That afternoon, while Ryan was at work, Olivia made the call.
"Olivia, sweetheart!" Margaret's voice was cheerful and expectant. "I was just thinking about you. Did you get my text about the movers?" "I did, Mom, and I need to tell you about a change in plans." Olivia kept her voice even and pleasant. "I won't be giving Ethan and Lena my nursery furniture, but I've arranged for a complete nursery set to be delivered to their apartment on Saturday morning instead." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched long enough for Olivia to count her heartbeats. "I'm sorry," Margaret said finally, her voice tight with confusion, "but I think I misheard you." "You heard correctly. I'm keeping my nursery as it is, but Ethan and Lena will have everything they need for their baby. I've purchased a beautiful, modern set that will be delivered Saturday morning." "Olivia," Margaret's tone shifted to the dangerous quiet that had terrified Olivia as a child. "We discussed this yesterday. You agreed to share your things with your brother." "You announced your decision yesterday," Olivia corrected gently. "I never agreed to anything. But this way, everyone gets what they need. Ethan and Lena have a complete nursery. I keep the room I've spent months creating, and the babies both have everything they need." "This is ridiculous," Margaret snapped, her facade of pleasantness cracking. "You're being selfish and materialistic over things that can easily be replaced." Olivia took a deep breath, hearing Jasmine's coaching in her head. "Stay calm, don't take the bait, redirect to the facts." "I think providing a complete nursery for Ethan and Lena is actually quite generous, Mom. They'll have beautiful, brand new furniture chosen specifically for their needs." The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with Margaret cycling through guilt, anger, and attempted manipulation. But for the first time in her adult life, Olivia didn't bend. She didn't apologize, didn't justify her decision beyond the basic facts, and did not allow her mother to reframe her boundary setting as a character flaw. When she finally hung up, her hands were shaking with adrenaline, but she felt something she'd never experienced after a confrontation with her mother: victorious. Her phone immediately rang again, Ethan this time. "Liv, Mom is freaking out. She says you're refusing to help with the nursery." "I'm helping plenty," Olivia replied, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "You're getting a brand new nursery delivered Saturday morning,
everything you could possibly need. But why can't we just use your stuff? It's already bought, already perfect. This seems like a waste of money. For a moment, Olivia felt the old familiar tug of guilt, the ingrained need to make her brother's life easier at her own expense. But then she thought about the baby moving inside her, about the legacy she wanted to leave, about the mother she wanted to be. Because it's mine, Ethan. I created that room for my child, and I'm keeping it. But you and Lena will have everything you need, probably nicer than what I have, since it's all brand new. After she hung up, Olivia sat in her kitchen, feeling like she'd learned to breathe underwater. The confrontation hadn't killed her. Her family hadn't disowned her. The world hadn't ended because she'd said no to her mother's demands. Instead, she felt stronger than she had in years, and for the first time since the baby shower, she felt truly excited about Saturday morning, not because of what would be taken from her, but because of what she'd chosen to keep. Saturday morning arrived with unseasonably warm October weather, sunlight streaming through the apartment windows as if the day itself was choosing sides. Olivia had barely finished her coffee when the buzzer rang, two sharp, impatient sounds that made her stomach clench with recognition. "Olivia, it's your mother. Open the door immediately." Margaret's voice through the intercom carried the authority of someone who had never been successfully defied, tinged with the kind of cold fury that had terrorized Olivia throughout childhood. But instead of the familiar fear, Olivia felt something new settling in her chest. A calm resolve that surprised her with its steadiness. "Good morning, Mom," Olivia replied through the intercom, her hand instinctively moving to rest on her belly. "The movers you hired should be at Ethan's apartment by now, receiving the new nursery furniture I arranged. We need to discuss this ridiculous situation face to face. Let me up right now." Ryan appeared beside her, his presence a steadying force. "You don't have to let her up if you're not ready," he said quietly. But Olivia knew this confrontation had been building for 32 years. It was time. Minutes later, Margaret Harper burst through the apartment door like a storm system, her face flushed with indignation and her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled from the morning's drama. Behind her trailed Ethan, looking uncomfortable and avoiding eye contact, his usual charm dimmed by obvious guilt.
"This stops now, Olivia," Margaret declared, sweeping into the living room as if she owned it. "This selfish tantrum ends today. Those movers are going to come back here and collect the nursery furniture for your brother, and you're going to stop this childish rebellion." Olivia remained by the door, one hand on the frame for support, the other still protecting her unborn child. "The movers are exactly where they need to be, Mom, delivering furniture to Ethan and Lena's apartment. Furniture that you wasted thousands of dollars on out of spite?" Margaret's voice pitched higher, the controlled facade she maintained in public completely abandoned now that they were alone. "Do you have any idea how humiliated I was when those delivery men showed up at Ethan's place instead of coming here? How do you think that looked to the neighbors?" "It looked like a generous sister helping her brother prepare for his first child, which is exactly what it is." Margaret's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Don't play word games with me, young lady. You know exactly what you're doing. You're punishing your family because you can't stand that Ethan needs help and you have the resources to provide it." "I am helping Ethan," Olivia said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I spent almost $3,000 on furniture for his baby, but I'm not giving him mine." "Those things aren't yours anymore," Margaret exploded, her composure completely shattered. "I decided they would go to Ethan, and that's final. Family decisions aren't made by selfish individuals. They're made by the family matriarch who knows what's best for everyone." The words hung in the air like a physical presence, revealing the core of Margaret's worldview with startling clarity. Family matriarch, as if Olivia were still a child subject to her mother's absolute authority, as if marriage and pregnancy and years of independence meant nothing when measured against Margaret's need for control. "This is my child," Olivia said, her voice cutting through her mother's bluster with quiet power. "This is my home. You don't decide here."
Margaret's face went white with shock. In 32 years, Olivia had never spoken to her with such direct defiance. There had been no apologetic tone, no request for understanding, no softening language to cushion the blow. Just a simple statement of fact that redrew the boundaries between them with surgical precision. "How dare you?" "I dare because I'm about to become a mother. And I refuse to teach my child that love means erasing yourself for other people's convenience. I refuse to model the kind of relationship where one person's needs always come second." Ethan shifted uncomfortably by the door, finally speaking up. "Liv, come on. This is getting out of hand. Can't we all just—" "No." Olivia turned to face her brother directly for the first time since they'd arrived. "We can't all just pretend this is normal. Mom announced at my baby shower, in front of 30 people, that my months of work meant nothing because you needed help. She humiliated me to make your life easier, just like she's done our entire lives. That's not— I never asked her to." Ethan stammered, but Olivia could see recognition dawning in his eyes, the uncomfortable awareness of a pattern he'd benefited from, but never acknowledged. "You didn't have to ask. You never had to ask because Mom has been training me since childhood to sacrifice for your comfort. But it stops here, with my child. This baby will not learn to see their mother as someone whose needs don't matter." Margaret recovered from her shock and stepped closer, her voice dropping to the dangerous whisper that had always preceded the worst punishments of Olivia's childhood. "If you think you can turn your back on this family, if you think you can choose selfishness over loyalty, then you'll learn what it means to stand alone. Don't come crying to me when you need help with that baby." The threat was designed to terrify, to remind Olivia of her lifelong dependence on Margaret's approval and support. But instead of fear, Olivia felt a strange sense of liberation. The worst thing her mother could threaten, withdrawal of love and support, had already happened. The public humiliation at the baby shower had shown her exactly how much Margaret's love was worth. "I'm not standing alone," Olivia said calmly. "I have Ryan, I have friends who actually support me, and I have the strength I never knew I possessed. What I don't need is a family that only values me for what I can sacrifice." Margaret stared at her daughter as if seeing a stranger. The compliant, accommodating Olivia she'd shaped for decades had been replaced by someone who could set boundaries without apology, who could demand respect without guilt. "This isn't over," Margaret said finally, gathering what remained of her dignity. "Family doesn't abandon family, and you'll remember that when you need us." As she swept toward the door, she paused to deliver one final blow. "That nursery won't protect you from the reality of parenthood. You'll see how hard it is to raise a child without family support. Then you'll understand what you've thrown away for the sake of furniture." After they left, Olivia sank onto her couch, adrenaline making her hands shake. But underneath the physical reaction was something she'd never felt after a confrontation with her mother.
Victory. Not the hollow satisfaction of winning an argument, but the deep peace of finally standing up for herself and her unborn child. Ryan sat beside her, pulling her close. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," Olivia admitted, "but also free. For the first time in my life, I feel free." 3 days later, Olivia was working on client designs when her doorbell rang. Through the peephole, she saw Lena Martinez standing in the hallway, looking nervous and uncertain. After Saturday's confrontation, Olivia wasn't sure what to expect from her brother's girlfriend. But curiosity won over caution. "Lena," she said, opening the door, "is everything okay?" "I'm sorry to bother you," Lena said quickly, her words tumbling together. "I know things have been weird since the baby shower, but I really needed to talk to you. Can I come in?" Lena looked exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes and the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone still adjusting to pregnancy. She was younger than Olivia had initially realized, probably mid-20s,
And there was something vulnerable about her that triggered Olivia's protective instincts despite everything that had happened. They settled in the living room with herbal tea, and Lena immediately began apologizing. "The nursery you bought us is beautiful," she said, staring into her cup instead of meeting Olivia's eyes. "But I need you to know that I never wanted to take yours. I never asked Margaret to make that announcement." "I know," Olivia said gently. "I could see on your face at the shower that you were as surprised as everyone else." Lena looked up with relief. "Really? Because I've been worried that you hate me, that you think I'm some kind of gold digger trying to take advantage of Ethan's family." "I don't hate you at all," Olivia assured her. "What my mother did wasn't your fault. She has a pattern of creating situations where one person's needs are met by taking from someone else, and then she frames it as family loyalty." "That's what scares me," Lena admitted, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I grew up with nothing, bouncing between foster homes, never having any stability. When Margaret embraced me, when she started talking about family and support, it felt like salvation. But watching what happened to you at the shower, I realized I might be part of something that hurts people." Olivia studied the young woman across from her, seeing herself reflected in Lena's desperation for family acceptance. How many times had she made excuses for Margaret's behavior because the alternative, acknowledging the toxicity, felt too threatening to bear? "What does Ethan say about all this?" Olivia asked. Her laugh was bitter. "Ethan says whatever keeps the peace in the moment. He was horrified by his mother's announcement, but when she called him crying about your rebellion, he started talking about how family should stick together. When I tried to give him the furniture back, he said we needed it more than you did anyway." "And what do you think?" "I think I'm terrified of raising a child with someone who can't stand up to his mother, who changes his opinions based on who's talking to him last." Her eyes filled with tears. "I think I got pregnant by a man I barely know, and now I'm trapped in a family dynamic that I don't understand, but that feels dangerous." Olivia felt her heart break for this young woman who had stumbled into the Harper family drama while seeking the stability she'd never had. "Lena, you're not trapped, and you're not responsible for fixing Ethan or managing Margaret's emotions." "But what if I can't do this alone? What if Margaret withdraws her support because I don't play along with her games? I don't have anyone else." "You have yourself," Olivia said firmly, "and that's more powerful than you know. It took me 32 years to learn that lesson, but you're already seeing the patterns more clearly than I did at your age." They talked for over an hour, with Olivia sharing stories of growing up in Margaret's shadow and Lena describing her fears about motherhood without a support system. By the time Lena left, both women understood that they were allies rather than rivals, two mothers-to-be trying to protect their children from inheriting toxic family patterns. That evening, Ethan called. "I heard Lena came to see you today," he said without preamble. "She did. She's a thoughtful person, Ethan. You're lucky to have her." There was a long pause. "She said you talked about Mom's behavior, about family patterns." "We did." Another pause. Longer this time. "Liv, I've been thinking about what you said on Saturday, about Mom making decisions that affect everyone else without asking." I waited, sensing that my brother was working towards something important.
"I never saw it before," he continued slowly. "Or maybe I saw it, but didn't want to admit it. The way she's always swooped in to solve my problems while expecting you to handle yours alone. The way she makes these pronouncements about what everyone should do, and somehow it always works out better for me than for you. Ethan, no, let me finish. I've been the golden child my whole life, and I never questioned why.
I just accepted that you were the responsible one who didn't need help, and I was the creative one who deserved extra support. But watching Lena struggle with the idea of taking your nursery, seeing how scared she is of Mom's approval, I'm starting to understand what it must have been like for you. It was the first time in their lives that Ethan had acknowledged the family dynamics that had shaped both their childhoods. Olivia felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but the possibility of a different kind of relationship between them. "What are you going to do about it?" she asked. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I want to try to be better. For Lena, for my kid, maybe even for you. This baby shouldn't grow up thinking that love means some people matter more than others." After they hung up, Olivia sat in her reclaimed nursery, feeling something she'd never experienced in relation to her family. Hope. Not for a magical transformation or immediate healing, but for the possibility that breaking her own silence had given others permission to examine patterns they'd previously accepted as normal. Change was slow, complicated, and sometimes painful, but it was also apparently contagious. 2 weeks later, Olivia hosted what she privately called her real baby shower, a small gathering of the people who had actually supported her through the nursery crisis. The guest list was intentionally curated. Jasmine, Ryan's family, her closest work friends, Mrs. Callahan from down the hall, and Lena, who had become an unexpected ally in navigating family complexity. The atmosphere was completely different from the community center event that had started everything. Instead of formal decorations and orchestrated activities, Olivia's living room buzzed with genuine conversation and laughter. People brought gifts because they wanted to, not because obligation demanded it. The food was simple, but delicious. Takeout from Olivia's favorite Mediterranean restaurant, instead of Margaret's elaborate catering. "I propose a toast," Jasmine announced, raising her glass of sparkling cider as guests gathered in a loose circle. "To Olivia Harper, who finally learned the most important word in the English language." "What word is that?" asked Carol, Ryan's mother, with a smile. "No. Such a small word, such enormous power. To Olivia for choosing herself and her baby over family dysfunction, for showing us all what it looks like to protect what matters." "To Olivia," the room chorused, and this time the celebration felt entirely genuine. Later, as guests mingled and shared stories, Olivia found herself in the nursery with Mrs. Callahan, who was admiring the paper crane mobile with particular interest. "You know," the older woman said, thoughtfully, "I've been watching families in this building for 40 years. I've seen a lot of patterns pass from one generation to the next, some beautiful, some destructive. What you did took real courage." "I just said no to giving away my furniture," Olivia replied, though she knew it had been much more than that. "You said no to a lifetime of being invisible," Mrs. Callahan corrected gently. "You decided your child deserved to see their mother as someone worthy of respect. That's not small, dear. That's everything." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Olivia settled in her rocking chair, the same one she'd refinished months ago, the same one Margaret had tried to reassign to Ethan. The room around her looked exactly as she'd envisioned it during those hopeful planning sessions, but it felt different now. Not just beautiful, but claimed. Not just decorated, but defended. Ryan appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of decaf. "Penny, for your thoughts?" "I'm thinking about legacy, about what we pass on to our children without realizing it. For 32 years, I thought love meant sacrifice, that family meant putting everyone else's needs first. I almost taught our baby that same lesson." "But you didn't," Ryan pointed out, settling on the floor beside her chair as he had so many times during this journey. "You chose something different." "I chose something terrifying," Olivia corrected with a smile. "I have no idea how to be someone who sets boundaries, who demands respect, who believes her needs matter, but I guess I'll learn as I go." Her phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Thank you for today. For the first time since getting pregnant, I feel like I'm not alone in this." Another message followed from Ethan. "Proud of you, Liv. Sorry it took me so long to see what was really happening." Olivia showed the messages to Ryan, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. Look at that, Ryan said with wonder. Your courage is giving other people permission to change too. As they sat together in the nursery that had become the symbol of Olivia's transformation, she felt her baby move, strong kicks that seemed to say hello to the world they would soon enter. This child would grow up with a mother who knew her worth, who could model healthy boundaries, who understood that love shouldn't require self-erasure. The nursery around them held the same furniture, the same decorations, the same careful details Olivia had planned months ago. But now it represented something more powerful than beautiful preparation for parenthood. It was evidence that some things were worth fighting for, that love meant protecting what mattered most, and that saying no to the wrong things made it possible to say yes to everything that truly counted. In 3 months, she would hold her child in this room, in this chair, surrounded by the love she had learned to claim for herself. And that baby would grow up knowing that their mother was someone who believed she deserved beautiful things, including respect, support, and the radical notion that her needs mattered just as much as everyone else's. Margaret's voice still echoed occasionally in the back of Olivia's mind, questioning her choices and predicting consequences that had never materialized. But it was getting quieter with each passing day, drowned out by stronger voices, Ryan's steady support, Jasmine's fierce loyalty, her own emerging sense of self-worth, and the promise she'd made to the child she carried, to break the cycles that had defined her childhood and create something entirely new. 3 months later, Olivia was folding tiny onesies in the nursery when the familiar sound of her mother's voice echoed through the apartment building's intercom. Margaret had maintained radio silence since their confrontation, a punishment designed to make Olivia reconsider her selfishness. But the birth of baby Emma Harper had apparently ended the Cold War. "Olivia, dear, it's Grandma. I'm here to meet my granddaughter." Margaret's voice carried its old authority, as if the past months of silence had been a minor misunderstanding. Olivia looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully in the vintage crib that had started everything. At 2 weeks old, her daughter was already showing signs of strong opinions, crying lustily when hungry, sleeping deeply when content, completely uninterested in anyone's agenda but her own. Olivia smiled, recognizing something of herself in that fierce independence. "One moment, Mom," she called through the intercom, then turned to Ryan, who was assembling a new high chair in the corner. "Are you ready for this?" "The question is whether you're ready," he replied, pausing in his work to study her face. Olivia considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, the prospect of facing Margaret's disapproval would have sent her into anxious preparation, mentally rehearsing apologies and justifications. Now she felt only a calm certainty about what she would and wouldn't accept. When Margaret swept into the apartment minutes later, her eyes immediately went to Emma, asleep in Ryan's arms. But instead of the warm grandmother Olivia had expected, Margaret's expression held a calculating quality that made Olivia's protective instincts flare. "She's beautiful," she said, though her tone suggested she was checking off a required response. "I assume you'll be bringing her to Sunday dinners starting next week? The family is eager to welcome her properly." There it was, the assumption of control disguised as tradition. The expectation that Olivia would fall back into old patterns now that she was sleep-deprived and vulnerable with a newborn. "Emma and I will visit when we're ready," Olivia replied evenly. "Right now, we're still adjusting to being home." Margaret's smile tightened. "Nonsense. Babies need to bond with their extended family. And frankly, Olivia, you look exhausted. You need the support that only family can provide." Her eyes swept the nursery with obvious satisfaction, though I'm sure this expensive little room isn't as practical as you thought it would be. Real parenting is messier than designer magazine spreads. The comment was designed to undermine Olivia's confidence, to suggest that her fight to keep the nursery was naive and ultimately pointless. 6 months ago, it might have worked.
Instead, Olivia looked around the room where she'd spent countless peaceful hours nursing Emma, where she'd rocked her daughter through the difficult early nights, where every carefully chosen element had proven its worth and comfort and functionality. Actually, she said with quiet pride, this room has been perfect for everything we've needed. If you insist on being stubborn about family gatherings, she continued, her voice sharpening, then I suppose I'll have to visit more often. Emma needs consistency, and if you won't bring her to the family will come to her. It was classic Margaret, reframing invasion as devotion, making her demands sound like sacrificial love. But before Olivia could respond, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Mom, you can't just announce a visitation schedule without asking. This is Olivia and Ryan's home, their baby, their choice about how to handle family time. Margaret turned to her son with shocked betrayal. Ethan, surely you understand the importance of family unity.
I understand the importance of respecting boundaries, Ethan interrupted, and Olivia felt a surge of gratitude for her brother's growth. Lena and I learned that lesson when we became parents. We decide who visits our son and when, and Olivia deserves the same respect. Margaret's face cycled through confusion, anger, and finally, grudging recognition that her old tactics no longer worked. Her children had learned to support each other instead of competing for her approval. If this is how this family is going to be, she said with wounded dignity, then I suppose I'll know where I stand. You stand wherever you choose to stand, Mum, Olivia said gently but firmly. If you want to be part of Emma's life, really part of it, not just in control of it, then you're welcome here. But it will be on terms that respect my role as her mother and Ryan's role as her father. Margaret stared at her eldest daughter as if seeing a stranger. The compliant girl who had absorbed family dysfunction for decades had been replaced by a woman who could set limits without guilt, who could offer love without surrendering authority. As Margaret gathered her purse with theatrical precision, Mrs. Callahan's words echoed in Olivia's mind. Don't let people decide what you deserve. The elderly neighbor had been right. Once Olivia stopped accepting less than she deserved, everything had changed. After Margaret left, Ethan stayed for another hour, admiring his niece and sharing stories about his own son's early weeks. When he finally prepared to leave, he paused at the nursery door. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing me what it looks like to choose your child's well-being over family expectations. Lena and I are trying to do the same thing." That evening, as Olivia settled into her rocking chair for Emma's final feeding of the day, she felt the deep satisfaction of promises kept. The nursery around them remained exactly as she'd dreamed it. Beautiful, peaceful, wholly theirs. But more importantly, Emma would grow up with a mother who knew her worth, who could model healthy relationships, who understood that the strongest families were built on respect rather than submission. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, full of possibility and challenge. But inside this reclaimed room, holding her daughter close, Olivia Harper had everything she needed: love that didn't require sacrifice, family that chose respect over control, and a future finally fully her own.